Welcome to the Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show will have a talk about something in Linux, or it could be a desktop, it could be an application, or very excitingly, a distribution that somebody might have an almost unhealthy obsession with. We also chat about news or any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. With me today, I have Shickle, Eris, Mint Spider, or also known as Peter, Sravan, Colin, Vash, or you can look him up on YouTube as the Vashinator. He's got some very interesting things to watch there. And last, and certainly least, not least, Jinda. How are you guys?
Excellent.
I'm Nate. I am a Linux, vintage tech, and fitness enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the openSUSE project. And I am very excited about today's show. We're going to be doing a distro exploration on openSUSE Leap 15.4. We're going to check what's on the menu for next week, do a news flight if there's time, a community free pour, and a last call. So first, I'll start off with what someone is doing cool in Linux or tech. Sravan tried to convince me that has nothing to do with Linux, it's just tech, but I say you can run it on Linux, so therefore it's Linux. So Sravan, you said something about playing with Python and the Qt Toolkit. How is that going?
It's sort of going well. I think I already achieved what I wanted. So I'll start with the background. I'm a battery researcher. I'm a PhD student. So we are just starting a ton of tests on a new equipment. So we don't have like some software written for it. So we read data from sensors, but we didn't have like a GUI interface to like start and stop data logging. So I somehow had to create a simple GUI tool to start and stop data logs for each individual test. And I sort of had introduction to Qt toolkit using Qt Creator like a couple of weeks ago, not a couple of years, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. I just played around it for a day. I gave it up. I didn't find it like that. Like I couldn't do what I wanted to do. Qt Creator is like a GUI tool to create like Qt based apps. But again, I had a very short deadline on Wednesday, like as fast as possible to create a simple GUI interface to start and stop data. So I was like, okay, let me take a different approach, not using Qt Creator, but just write using write a Python script. So Qt, the main coding language for Qt is C++, but you can also do it in Python. There are two sorts of Python like translations. One is called PyQt, PyQt5, PyQt6. I think you should have heard of it. Most distributions install it when you're installing Qt apps. And other is called PySide. I think PySide is more well licensed. It's licensed with more in line with like Linux GPL. I haven't researched that much about it. So most people who want to create apps try to use PySide. PySide is currently preferred by the Qt Foundation. So there's two PySides, PySide 2, which is for Qt5, PySide 6, which is for Qt6. It's up to you. I think everyone is moving to Qt6, so I would prefer, if you want to use PySide 6. Like if you're familiar with Python programming, like it's not that hard to start. You just have to look at some of the documentation. Like I was able to create a simple but fully functional GUI using Python and Qt. So the main thing this program does is like I have 120 channels I have to do experiments on. So I want to start and stop test independently. So I have like a list box, which 120 channels, and then start and stop tests, and also the sensor information for each test, which gets, so every time I click on a channel name, the information for that channel gets updated. So if a test is running on a channel, the start button is grayed out for that channel and stop button is activated. So, but when a test is not running, the start button is activated and the stop button is grayed out. And some other things, like it's very easy to do. Like I was able to do this in 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. But like if you want to create any GUI app for your Linux use or anything which you want to use, if you want to run some commands regularly, I think it's a very easy solution. Like it won't take more than a couple of days for simple apps, like not even a couple of days, like 3 or 4 hours for simple apps to create like simple like push button things. I have like my application is even more, I have to do more because I have to run this experiments for an year. Like even after I graduate, someone else has to run it.
Oh.
So my application has to be more robust. So it took somewhat more time, maybe 10, 12 hours. But if you want a simple app to run simple things in Linux, it's please take a look. It's very easy. It's called PyQt. You can find several things. Very good documentation on the Qt side, but also so many tutorials on Python and Qt. Like there's so much documentation. There's so much. You can do whatever you want.
That's cool.
I suggest if you want to create some GUI apps. I don't know how user-friendly GTK is, but if you want a cross-platform app, again, the good thing about Qt is it's cross-platform. I wrote this for Windows because again, all our university hardware runs Windows, but I can run this application on Linux too. Like I can modify it. Like now I'm confident to write like simple GUI apps in Linux, or it's very easy.
Would you be willing to share some of those resources you use to get started with it?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Put them in the chat, either Zoom or.
I have some of them written down in my, again, I think I told you a couple of some Linux Saloon episodes ago. Like I take notes for everything.
Okay.
So I have some of these there. So yeah, I'll share the links with Aris. Aris can post them in the.
Yep, that'd be great, because then I'll also put it in the show description or the video description, so people can look up your resources as well. Because the whole point of Linux Saloon is to actually help other people, not just to I don't know, do whatever it is we're doing, or not to be self-serving, but to actually serve others. So that is very cool. That kind of makes me, it very much makes me interested to see how quickly I could whip something together. I have some ideas that I'd like to implement.
That's like if you want any dashboards for your like crazy projects you do always, Nate, it's a good place to start. Like I shared this with my advisor. Like he's been working with me on the code, and he's like he wants a dashboard for his solar panels or whatever, or his car. He does some crazy projects. So he was like, okay, he looked at my code, right? We worked on it together. Like we did we can do something. He wants to do something similar for his home stuff. So it's like, I'm saying it's like, please try it. You can do like, it will expand your horizons. You can do simple like GUI stuff. Like it's for me, it was easy to learn because I was familiar with Python, but I think it's simple enough at least for simple apps. Like if you don't want to do many things and complex things, there are so many Qt widgets available for purpose, like a button, a list, a text field, like a dial, like all these simple GUI stuff you see everywhere. It's just like calling a single line and adding it to a grid. It's like, it's sort of intuitive. Again, I took a programmatic approach to it, but you can use Qt Creator too. I'll share the link for Qt Creator. If you want more like a GUI based approach, you can do that too. But I personally am more familiar with writing code. Like I couldn't figure the GUI tool out because there were too many options. Like just like any Qt, it's like too many options. So
well, they're there because somebody wanted them.
Yes. Again, it's for full-fledged app development. Like, and again, my use was not that. Like, I didn't want it to look good. I wanted it to be functional. So just a normal, okay, I need some buttons and some things in the layout. I want to put it somewhere. So my use case was a little bit different. But you can do stuff either programmatically using Python, PySide 6, or Qt. Like Qt Creator, you can choose PySide 6 as a backend. Like you can choose, if you're familiar with C++, you can choose that. Or if you want PySide 2, PySide 6, you can choose whatever backend you want in Qt Creator so that Again, on the back end, you can edit these Python files if you're familiar with that, or C++ if you're familiar with that. So there's like freedom of choice in what language sort of you want to develop on the back end. More, it's like more flexible. I think I don't know if there are Python bindings for GTK, but I think there are. Like when I initially thought about exploring this like 3-4 weeks ago, just for a simple app, which I didn't finish doing. Like I asked people who are familiar with developing apps, like what should I do? Like with the fellow developer in the Endeavor's team, he asked me a few questions and then I settled on Qt instead of GTK. Finally. So I had choice between Qt and GTK. Then I figured out with this Python, okay, Qt is better. So I went with Qt.
That's great. And the whole cross-platform thing is probably quite important to you as well.
Yes, for me. Yeah, for me it is.
That's very cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Get some resources out there so people interested in maybe toying around with Qt and Python on their own, they can start doing so. Vash, you've been releasing a lot of videos lately, and it seems like you've really ratcheted up the quality of the content. So what's been going on? What's the inspiration?
Just trying to take things a bit more seriously, but yeah, I don't know if 2 is a lot, but 2 in 2 weeks is not bad. So I'm just trying to keep that momentum going, I guess.
That's great. So what's your inspiration for creating content? Is there like what is it that's boiling inside you that says I must do this?
Well, generally it's more that I find something interesting, or I find a problem that I've found a way to solve, and I'm really trying to help get the information out there, because to me there's so many things out there that people don't hear about, especially on the main sites that are out there, like LogSeq.
Mm-hmm.
LogSeq is just not something that typically you're going to see like talked about on a bunch of big Linux sites, because it's not something that's going to make major waves, but it's an application that I really like, and so I try to talk about it when I get the chance to. And today I was looking more at Ghost, which is an open source site software, kind of like WordPress, but it is more focused on the writing aspect and memberships and things like that. So just trying to look for some stuff maybe that people don't often hear about, or finding new ways to do stuff like that. But I'm always open to take a look at topics. So if anybody has some, always feel free to comment with those ideas.
I've also enjoyed your change in production style, because now we can actually see what Vash looks like. I've known him for years, but only as an avatar and a voice. But now you can put name to face. So that's worth a subscription right there. And he's still not showing his face here. So I'm a little bit sad, but I'll get over it. Colin, is there anything you wanted to share? I know you're all you had your fight with the kangaroo, and so did you win?
Yeah, I won. Yep.
Okay.
No, I really don't have nothing to show. I'm just working on something at the moment. But nothing else. I've been taking it a bit easier lately, so I haven't been uploading as much as I normally do. Just taking a bit of a break. I think you need to have a break every now and then, and just refresh yourself. Can get just to the point where it's saturation, and I think you need to just give yourself a bit of a break and get away from it. And
so like
just
a vacation.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
Yeah. I think that is normal and healthy. I think people have to take a break from something from time to time. So excellent. Well, I'm glad your face is still in the same orientation. So obviously the kangaroo didn't do too much on you, and so I'm happy about that. So congratulations.
Kangaroo's gone. Kangaroo went bush. Gone.
So Nate.
Yes.
I'd like to share one little story from this week.
Absolutely.
It starts with Shikkel being very surprised at me today for still running Solus. I'm surprised that he's surprised. But going back a step, I did have one little hiccup this week with Solus, and it's not Solus's fault at all. It's not even System 76's Filo's fault at all.
Is it your
the other
fault?
week, I'm going to explain the situation. So normally I just lock my computer.
Right.
I just lock it, turn the monitor off. And a couple of weeks ago, I accidentally hit suspend. And I thought, uh-oh, I've never used suspend, hope it works. I came back a little while later, moved the mouse, it came back. I thought, oh, great, suspend works. A couple of days ago, I came back to my computer, moved the mouse, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Hit the keyboard, nothing happened. In fact, the keyboard wouldn't even respond to like a caps lock and such. And I thought, okay, what's happening here? Is suspend broken on me? Did it fail? I found out what it was, and it wasn't a software issue. My cordless mouse ran out of power.
That was
while
it, huh?
It was in suspend.
So what?
So suspend got stuck because the mouse couldn't respond.
So why couldn't? Did the keyboard? Is it on the same?
I'm not technical, so I don't know if it because the mouse failed. The whole thing just got locked up. I don't know.
The
Well-
suspense was killing me.
Yes, exactly.
Or
So I had to do the
I-
whole power button thing, and I got it rebooted fine. But
just kill the Stelio.
I bet I bet when it went into suspend, so typically like suspend, the way it does it just tosses everything into RAM and runs into a low power state.
yeah,
The first thing it does, like when you load anything up, is it will check for devices that it expects to be present and communicate
go.
with. So I bet if that was mismatched, it probably freaked out and froze. So that makes
so
sense.
it's just something that some things happen in tech you can't expect.
So is that why that makes sense as to why some people put a huge amount of RAM? Is it RAM memory?
Hard
Not
drive
memory.
space in their swap.
Swap. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of suspend. Yeah.
Yeah,
hibernate.
You have to. You
Oh, that's
to for
hibernate.
to work.
Right. What's the
So
difference between hibernate and suspend?
Suspend is a function that will it will remain in memory, so on RAM, rather than so the computer turning fully off. It just goes into a low power state where it keeps just about everything off except for the memory and like some basic functions. But if you lose power, you lose that because memory is volatile. It needs power to remain in its state.
Right.
Hibernate takes that memory state, dumps it to the disk in a way that can be booted from. So the actual when you first load up your Linux system, it's set by an init RAM file system that sort of like boots everything and chooses which kernel to load and all that stuff. Essentially, when you hibernate a machine, that dump file, that init RAM FS becomes that hibernate. Essentially, everything points to that rather than booting a fresh kernel. So it's cool. And you don't always have to have the RAM size the exact same size as the swap and vice versa. But if the amount of memory used is greater than the swap file you have, or close to it, it will not work. Because you have to have enough space to put everything that's in memory onto the disk.
I think it checks before it starts the process, so the process would just fail. I think.
Usually, yeah. I'm sure if you get really unlucky, you could find a way to break it. I would.
Computers break? No way.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into the main topic, and that is a distro exploration of openSUSE Leap 15.4 or 15.4. So the rules of this exploration is the intent is to talk about the different aspects of the OS and discuss the experience after using it. This is a discussion by which only objective, constructive conversation will be, I don't want to say permitted, but is what we're targeting for the conversation. Non-objective opinions like this is garbage is not really helpful. Rather, if you say, I wish it had this feature or that feature, I need a feature that allows me to do a specific task, that would benefit the conversation. The point is to highlight the positives, but not to ignore the lowlights of the project as well, because remember, this is a labor of love of some, so let's not poo-poo on it. Now, Eris, you did a straw poll on openSUSE Leap, and how did that go?
Okay. The poll was, how is openSUSE Leap exploration going? 10% on Telegram said the chameleon is great, even better than the song.
Yeah.
37% said the chameleon is okay. 16% said not going great. Come on, chameleon. 6% said not interested in trying it. 21% said unable to do the exploration. 10% said not interested in doing the explorations in general. And for Matrix, it was 50-50. 50% said the chameleon is great, even better than the song. And then 50% said not interested in doing the explorations in general.
Well, I know who voted for the chameleon is great on the Matrix. I know him personally very well. Well, I guess if we add it together, so 47% were positive about it, and 16% were not. That's not too bad, I think. All right, so a little bit about openSUSE Linux. So openSUSE is a project that serves to promote the use of free and open source software. It's well known for the Linux distributions, mainly Tumbleweed, which is a tested rolling release, and Leap, distribution with long-term support. MicroOS and Cubic are new transactional self-contained distributions for use as desktop or container runtime. The initial release of the community project was the beta version of SUSE Linux 10.0. The current stable fix release of openSUSE Leap 15.4 was released on the 8th of June of this year. Additionally, the project creates several tools such as YAST, Open Build Service, OpenQA, Snapper, Machinery, Portis, Kiwi, and OSEM. openSUSE offers Leap, the LTS-style distribution that shares its codebase with SUSE Linux Enterprise, or SLE, effectively making it a non-commercial version of the enterprise-grade operating system. Users that prefer more up-to-date free software can use the rolling release distribution Tumbleweed. Users can also use the Open Build Service. Moreover, the flexibility of openSUSE makes it easy to repurpose for specific goals like running a web or email server. Like most Linux distributions, openSUSE includes both a default graphical user interface and a command line interface. Users of openSUSE may choose between several desktop environments to include KDE Plasma, GNOME, Cinnamon, Mate, LXQt, and XFCE, and I'm sure there's others that are out there. openSUSE supports thousands of software packages across a full range of free software and open source development. openSUSE is compatible with a wide variety of hardware on numerous instruction sets, including ARM-based single-board computers. So examples of that, and this is where Sravan should get excited: Raspberry Pi 2 and 3, Pine 64, ARM v8 platform, also known as ARch64, the Banana Pi, which sounds delicious, the Beagle board on the ARM v7 instruction set, and the first iteration of the Raspberry Pi on ARM v6 ISA, RISC-V PowerPC, which is PPC64 and PP64LE. I forget what LE stands for, like some instruction set. And S390 are supported as well. The ISO options include, well, actually there's lots of them, but they fall under 4 basic categories. One is Tumbleweed, a rolling desktop and server. That can be either like an offline install or network install. Got Leap 15.4, which is an LTE version of SUSE Linux Enterprise. That can also be an offline or online install. And, I should back up. Tumbleweed includes 32-bit x86 as well. Leap Micro 5.2, which is an ultra-reliable, lightweight operating system built for commercial, containerized and virtualized workloads. MicroOS, which is a microservice OS providing transactional or atomic updates upon read-only Butterfest root file system. So we are concentrating on Leap, which is one of the distributions of the openSUSE project. So technically speaking, Leap is the distribution, not openSUSE, if that makes any sense. So when I say I have an almost unhealthy obsession with the openSUSE project, that's all the things it does. So Sravan, that was for you. So the setup process. I saw some comments in the Telegram. I was I was watching, maybe not always commenting, but I was watching to see what people were saying and kind of laughing a little bit because I do realize it is different than other distributions, kind of how they roll things. Chris was one constantly calling it unpure Michigan, which made me laugh a lot. So I do appreciate that. So how did the setup process go? Does anybody want to kick that off as to Shickle? Please do.
So I think the thing that I found interesting about the installer, how it loads is really fascinating to me. So you could kind of see a lot of the pieces that I don't think a lot of installers show, or maybe there's things that are in it that aren't supported in a lot of other distro installers. You get like an initial loading bar, and it tells you that it's like probing devices and looking for like certain types of peripherals. There's pieces of hardware that it's looking for that I didn't even know existed. Really cool. So that was interesting. And I also noticed that you can sort of perform all of this like through a serial port connected through like another machine. You don't actually even have to have it hooked up to like your monitor if you didn't want to, which is really, really cool. So
Yeah.
I think that by far, first impression, does some really cool stuff.
I don't know if there's another distribution that has that same kind of serial interface install that openSUSE does. If there is, I am not aware of it, but I do think that is very
I've never
cool.
seen it.
And I've never actually tried that, but it'd be cool if like a headless install. Essentially, you don't even need a monitor; you can just use another computer, which I think is pretty darn cool. It's a neat feature. Anyway, go ahead.
I didn't even bother to look at what it was doing during that progress. I just thought, I'll wait till it's done. But that progress bar is actually what Fedora used to do back in the day. They used to have a progress bar like that on initial startup for boot.
Yeah, there's a lot of cross-pollination between openSUSE and Fedora. I don't know if you noticed that, but there's a serious amount of...
Yeah, there's some similarities. Yeah, definitely.
Did anybody have any challenges or comments with the installer itself?
One thing that I wish openSUSE did was that when you set up your Wi-Fi, it gives you, it's like iOS. It just shows you like, well, iOS gives you letter by letter what you're typing in, but I think for openSUSE it's all invisible characters. I wish you could just click a button and say, show me what I'm typing. Like I understand by default, if it's fine that it doesn't show you anything, but there should be like a button that says, show me everything. I know nobody's looking at me right now, so I can just type it in and be easier that way. Especially if you have like a long Wi-Fi password.
Right.
Yeah. I for the most part, I love the openSUSE installer. I love how much power it gives you. Like the way you can open the SSH port if you want at the screen before you install it. It gives you an option there to open the port or keep it closed. Have the firewall installed or disable it. You can also go into the software, pick out your software if you want to like not get the games that come with KDE. You can go in there and take that off. A lot of different little options. I think there needs to be a way to make that more apparent. But other than that, I love how there's so many options for that. You can also like there's like an option there for no bootloader if you don't want the bootloader. And it's a little slow. I will say that. It's probably one of the slowest installers.
Yeah, but it probably is, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is slow.
I didn't even know.
I love all the options. Can I say that?
I didn't see the package install options. I don't remember saying that, to be honest.
The way it is, you know, that screen before you hit next to install it, it says software and it has like a summary of everything. If you click on software, it goes into the patterns, and then you click on the bottom left. There's a little button that says details. You click on details, and then you get even more granular access to all the different software that you install.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I've got to stop being in a hurry to install things.
There truly is a lot to explore just in the installation. So you can choose KDE as your desktop environment if you want, and you can actually go through and add patterns for other things. Like if you want to install GNOME at the same time, you absolutely can. There's nothing stopping you from that. Although Sravan might argue with you that it's not a good idea, but I will say it's not. You can do it.
Installing two desktop environments parallel is never a good idea. I know from experience.
You got to do it the openSUSE way, and it's not a bad idea.
One thing that I found a little bit weird is when you do put your password in for the internet, for the wireless, it doesn't really seem to tell you whether it's connected or not. So it's pretty much just go next and hope for the best.
Yeah, I'm not actually
don't-
sure what happens if you mistype it. I did type it correctly, so I think it
Yeah.
just went through. But I don't know what happens if you mistype it. If does it error out? Does it start at the beginning? I'm not sure what happens.
shuts
next.
Yeah,
down.
that's a good point, isn't it? Maybe Nate knows. Then again, Nate never installs. He's been running openSUSE for years.
I actually install it all the time.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah, because I test it on different things, and so
Oh, okay, sure.
I'm quite accustomed to it. I don't often use the Wi-Fi portion of it, but I have used it, and you kind of have to. It's a little bit convoluted. That's actually the one area of the openSUSE installer I think that really needs some polish, and that's if it just had instead of like you shouldn't have to know what the protocol is, like if it's WPA 2 or enterprise or personal or WEP key, which why are you using a WEP key? I don't know. Slap yourself. But you shouldn't have to do that part of it. Outside of that, that actually installer is pretty great. What's also neat too is if you get all the way through the installer at the very end, and you notice that you didn't set like a host name, like a static host name for it, like set locally, you can very easily just click on network configuration, and you can re-go through and change those things right at the very end. I like that installation settings, the very last screen we can go through, and you can change different little aspects of it. Which this is also the only distribution I know that actually lets you adjust your CPU mitigations. I don't know if anybody played with that. You can actually disable it
that's pretty
entirely, or you can tweak it per your personal requirements. For the most part, I leave it on auto, but like for a laptop, I will actually turn off the mitigations.
It also lets you set your like boot parameters if you want to, as well as like controlling how long your grub menu waits there, or if it waits there at all, which is honestly pretty nice. And in that same page, it also lets you control whether or not the OS prober is running. So whenever you like run things and you got other OSs installed, Grub will like change its menu options to reflect those other OSs. You can just turn that off. So that's nice.
Installer, I found those options on YAS, but not in the installer. Isn't the installer too?
Yeah, it's at the very end. You'll have a list of all the things right before you install. You can click on each category to customize the settings. So this will be in like the booting category.
And the installer is actually YAST.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So-
Yeah. I had like
I find
adventure in installing on VirtualBox on Windows. I was like discussing with the group yesterday, like I didn't know what was going on. The first time I started VirtualBox, the net installer edition, I was getting kernel panic. I was like, okay. Then I tried the offline edition, same. Then I looked into, okay, all the Windows features. I ensured that all the virtualization stuff in the backend was turned on. I rebooted my computer after that. Again, it didn't work. Then I started exploring the VirtualBox settings. So I think somewhere in the processor, I had to enable like para virtualization as default instead of whatever specific thing. I think by default it's none. I like it. If you put it as default, it'll choose KVM or whatever backend by default, depending on whatever OS it recognizes. So I had to do that and some other minor tweaks. Then finally I got it to boot and install. My first install failed because install was successful. Then after the first reboot, the grub was fine. It shows VirtualBox. It actually, I think the installer recognizes VirtualBox and installs like specific packages so that it can run well on VirtualBox. I think it's called VM VirtualBox guest editions.
Yep.
So it actually installs as packages by default. And somehow it didn't work. I think it's an X issue because basically after the grub, it was like blank screen. I tried hard, nothing worked. Then I went to TTY. I did StartX. TTY worked, but StartX, that's where it failed. So I was like, let me try the installer again. I went through the whole process. That's where, like, the first time, for me, if the installer is slow, I don't care. Because if I'm using an OS, I'm going to be using it for a while. I won't be installing it constantly. So if it is taking half an hour or 40, I think it took around me an hour for each install. But I didn't mind it the first time because I was like, okay, I'm going to do it only once. The second time I minded it a little bit, but again, even then I was fine. I wasn't in a hurry to do many things today. It probably, I don't know why it's slow. Do you know any reason why, Nathan? Like what they do in the back end? There should be a reason why it's slow. But I don't care that much about the slowness of the installer.
So what's actually happening is it's building it's building the installation as it's installing it. So like Ubuntu uses a Squash FS, and they basically just expand it, and that's your installation. So this is actually going through.
FS, yeah.
Yeah. So this is going through and actually building it and installing it piece by piece based on your selections. So it's not a Squash FS. It's actually doing the process.
But even on we do that on an online install. So Endeavor's ISO has two options, like offline and online. So on online installs, we do the same thing, but on offline installs, we use Squash FS. So I found it strange. Like I choose the offline install option thinking that it would be faster, but it was not. But on my second try, everything worked fine. I choose KDE. It was good. Again, I'll tell you about my experience using it later, but the install process went fine. I was able to boot into KDE. But the only confusion I had, again, I was discussing it with Shikol yesterday, like, why are there so many sub-volumes for Btrfs? And also one more thing, maybe they can improve is the partition manager. It's not very intuitive when you're going for manual partitions. The partition module can be improved, maybe more like GUI stuff. Like if you look at partition module in Calamares, it has a graphic on the bottom showing how each partition is split. Like even in
it does have that.
Yeah,
stuff.
It has that. You have to actually select the drive itself. If you look at the way the drive tree is, if you select the actual drive part, then it'll show you. It'll actually show you graphically how everything is.
I think it should show by default, but maybe I didn't try selecting. I was just trying to explore different stuff. But the partition module, when I went to manual partition, it showed a list of subvolumes because I think you can choose the option like you can build off of defaults. That's the one thing I liked because you can choose a default structure and then you can build off of it and modify it. I don't think other installers have that option. That's the one thing I really liked is like, okay, there's a set of defaults and then you can manually change them because in Calamares, you can either choose the defaults or then you can do manual where you have to do everything from scratch. It doesn't get the default settings, but here that's really good. But then I didn't try like clicking on multiple stuff there because the defaults were good, but I didn't understand why for Btrfs there were like 8 sub-volumes. Like probably there should be a reason for it, but
it has to do with how it performs snapshots, the snapshot system.
Yeah.
That's really what it's for. They actually optimized that over a period of time, but they created the snapshots based on what was optimal for doing the copy on write, and then they going back to those snapshots at a later time.
One thing is that I think for the Btrfs thing, it's that snapshots were disabled by default, and you can enable them using manual or guided partitioning. But I couldn't find an option to enable snapshots by default in the manual or guided one.
I think depending on how big your partition was, it will disable snapshots if your partitions if it's too small.
Yeah,
so
that's too small.
Yep, that's why it'll do it then. Because I think they have a 40 gigabyte minimum recommendation, I believe, to automatically enable them.
I didn't want to put 40 gigabytes of my virtual hard disk on virtual machine.
Well, they can do dynamic on VirtualBox. That actually works pretty well.
I did dynamic, but I think it was just 8 GB or 12 GB or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll disable them.
It expands. You can change it later, but I didn't want to just put 40 in the beginning. Maybe that's why, but it didn't allow me an option. And I'll discuss our snapshots more later when I was actually exploring them.
Peter, you've been so patient holding your hand up. I hope it's not tired. Oh, it was a digital hand.
a long time ago, you mentioned host names, and that's what I mentioned. That when after my install, when I open up terminal, I got a nice little shock. But I looked at it, it said Peter at, and it was a long string of letters and numbers and dots, and it looked like a really long web address or IP address. I thought, what's this? Of course, I'm glad I knew about host name control command, so it was easy to change your host name.
That's good.
But it did hit me as a surprise.
I like to name all my machines. They all have different transformer names. So, minus a few, but they're all different transformers.
Something I really like about openSUSE's partitioning in the installer is that you can actually create RAID volumes with openSUSE's partitioner. And I've done this before multiple times. Whether or not I should have is totally not related, but it's like really cool to be able to do that, and it's something that I desperately miss in every other distribution, because I typically have to start the installer, open a terminal, manually create RAID devices, and then shut everything down, reboot into the installer again. OpenSUSE just does it all. It just handles all of it.
It's also like stupid simple as well. Like I have a server, and I set up has 6 drives, and I set up a RAID 10 array for it. And so I basically just select the drives, add it to the array, and then it does all the numbering and naming, whatever, and then it acts as one drive you can partition any way you like. So it's super
Absolutely genius.
Yeah, it's super easy to use. And let's pretend like you have a server set up, and the smart daemon was giving you warnings about the root partition, like root drive. I have a separate drive for root, the root drive failing, and you ignore it for an extended period of time because you do, and then it totally goes to garbage on you. If you then install on a new drive because the old drive died on you, hypothetically, that RAID array will show up just as before. No configuration. You have to go back into it. It'll recognize the array and just make it available to you. It's actually really pretty slick, and obviously save my bacon.
I would love to see, and I don't entirely know why the limitation is there right now, but I once wanted to install openSUSE itself onto a RAID volume or a RAIDed system or setup, and by default it's limited to 3 drives. If you want for like the root partition, honestly, probably makes sense. But I wanted to try like a RAID 5 for my root volume. I would like to see that maybe change. I don't really know why it's like that though. There's probably a reason. They probably figured that greater than 3 made no sense because it's probably not the best idea, but
I didn't install like the root partition on the RAID array because the motherboard is too old to recognize, like the BIOS couldn't boot from that. So that was unfortunate. So I basically had to bootstrap it with an SSD. Now it is anyway.
I wanted to mention that the way openSUSE sets up a ButterFS with all the different like sub volumes and everything, you can there's like a setting there where you can tell it like it helps you through it, and it says like what do you want to do, and then it says you can give it like a partition, and it does everything for that partition. It sets up the whole thing. It doesn't have to like take over the whole PC. You just give it a partition, and it does ButterFS with all the sub volumes. It does it automatically.
Yep. And it even asks about like if you have like the master boot record data, if you want to remove it or not, which is pretty cool because that's relevant for Windows stuff mostly, or like drives from older systems. So that's pretty thoughtful. Don't wipe the initial data that controls, loading operating systems. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great installer. Everything except for the Wi-Fi bit. And I know Matt might be listening, my co-host on Linux Out Loud, who constantly harps on openSUSE because of the Wi-Fi thing. But if he actually paid attention to like what you can do with Linux, then he obviously wouldn't say that. And that's his invitation to debate me. Not debate, but discuss, anybody else have anything they want to add about the setup process? Yes, please.
Just one more thing. I know I'm all over the place, but another thing about the partitioning, I absolutely love file systems, which is why I'm kind of nerding out over it. But this is my favorite installer for this, just for this reason alone. Or for these reasons alone. But you can actually set also with these partitions the actual mount options for any partitions or sub volumes you want. So if you have like a disk where like it's just going to store like data, but it's not part of your OS, if you remove that disk or whatever, you can set something on that mount option. So that way, if that drive's not there, it doesn't wait to start up. It just starts up. Normally, if you install an OS and it's got mount points for anything, if you remove those, or let's say the drive dies or whatever, if you go to start it up, it'll dump you into recovery mode. This lets you completely avoid that. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is very cool, and it's actually something I use on this system here, so that it doesn't hang on boot. Yeah, lots of neat options that they give you access to. Now, I will say the user experience, like, it doesn't feel as modern of an interface. It does look like it's been around a while, and that's because it has. Now, another thing that's very cool about openSUSE is you can use the entire thing just as it is, but completely in terminal using the ncursus interface. So back to that thing earlier about the serial connection, you can then actually do all these things, everything the same, but all in a terminal, and it works essentially the same, which is very
Pretty
cool.
cool.
Yeah. So as far as the interface, maybe not looking as modern as some other installers. If I had to give up like the ncursus and all the other cool stuff, it wouldn't be worth it.
No, it's so worth it, honestly, just for this.
What about additional applications? openSUSE doesn't install as many applications, perhaps, as they used to, like in the olden days of Linux, like 20-ish years ago. It used to be that a lot of things would get installed. Now it's a little bit more Spartan. So, were there any applications that specifically that you could not find for openSUSE that you needed?
No, I think it's got most applications that you would need. But what I've found with Leap is that like I'm not being smart here, but is Leap like the Debian version of openSUSE, because the packages seem to be a little bit behind?
Yeah, it is the LTS, and so everything is.
It's the long port, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
okay.
So for basically they're kind of locked for a year on Leap. So everything's a little bit older, and they work on hardening it a little bit more because they're using the SUSE Linux Enterprise core of it and then adding the community packages on top of it. So sometimes things will get updated on the community portion of it, but not the core pieces of it.
What is the support cycle for Leap?
I believe it's 18 months.
18 months?
Yep. So you get like 6 months basically to get onto the new one when
That's
next one
pretty
comes
decent.
out. And I noticed like if you wait close to that 18-month mark, you sometimes can things can sometimes get a little ropey. So
I didn't find anything that I couldn't install or I couldn't find, but there is something that I always try and remove and cannot for the life of me figure out how. I always use the KDE version of openSUSE. I mean, I've tried the other versions and they're pretty good. The XFCE version actually really impressed me the last time I used it. But in the KDE version, there's a terminal super user launcher.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I go to type terminal, that's the first thing that pops up, and I just want a normal terminal.
Interesting.
And I cannot figure out how to remove it. I've tried editing the .desktop file. I've tried looking for a package that installs that. It's been like 4 years. I've still not figured it out. But one day.
So I believe that is just a .desktop file. That's probably part of the package. What you could do is just eliminate that .desktop file out of your menu.
Mask it somehow. Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
So I've noticed that there's an abundance of repositories within openSUSE Leap.
More than you might realize, actually.
Now, there's a package source here with a openSUSE Leap 15.4-1. Now that's not checked off, so I don't remember that being there before. But is that something is that extra packages available with an updated repo or something, or what is that one all about?
I'm not sure about that one. They do have like configured but not activated things like the debug, the there's source packages and stuff like that. So check to see if maybe it's one of those.
No, because the debug wasn't switched on. Let me turn on the debug. Oh yeah, there's so many more. Yeah, okay. openSUSE Leap 15.4-1. I haven't checked it off, but I don't know what it does. Maybe I should surprise myself.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Checking that. I'd have to check on that. Now, I did an upgrade. So I had a openSUSE Leap 15.3 like in production essentially in my house, and I did do an upgrade on that to 15.4. I had no problems with that at all. All my applications updated and everything else, and so I'm very happy about that. So those are the two ways I tested it, but I do have lots of stuff added to that one in particular. A lot of I find that I've been leaning a little toward flat packs for applications as of late, because they are sometimes one of the problems I have with Leap is like in 15.3 the Telegram app was not updated, and so I actually ended up installing the Flatpak version instead, and I'm just going to keep rolling with that. No tumbleweed reference, pun intended. So don't have any issues with any additional applications that they wanted?
I just installed it today. I didn't try out too many applications, I think, but I explored YAST and other settings in KDE. That's the only thing I did.
Jinda, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I tried to install VirtualBox and it didn't seem to work. I had nothing but issues with it. XFCE was absolutely useless.
Oh, really?
Yeah, every time I installed it and tried to get it to work, VirtualBox naturally did not work at all. It came up with some simple error that it always does, and I fixed that, and then it just didn't work. I tried to install the codecs according to what I found online. I didn't use Nate's instructions, which actually worked. I used someone else's instructions, which failed miserably. Then when I reboot it, I went in to reboot it, and then there's this silly sign that says something like, failed to start X display manager. So I gave up XFCE completely and went to, and also the other thing is it's slow as molasses. To do anything with it was slow. So I dropped XFCE and went to KDE, and then it was a lot better. Everything worked better. Everything was better. Well, first of all, I used your instructions to install the codecs, which absolutely work, but the ones I found online did not, or I picked the wrong ones. I don't know which.
Well,
and then, but I still couldn't get VirtualBox to work. It still had some error with it. So, oh well.
I find that since I used it a lot, I basically, my website, cubiclate.com, was just basically a giant cheat sheet for everything that I needed to remember with openSUSE. That's really why I started doing that. So that's why the codec thing was there. So I set up a lot of machines. So like Colin asked if I don't install it very often, right? How often I installed it. It was often enough that I had to put my notes someplace. And I just chose to put them online and share them. Now, something that is good news, you don't actually need to install those codecs so much anymore. Not unless you're using, like for YouTube or any online stuff. For the most part, you shouldn't actually have to have install additional codecs for the most part. I didn't actually try like Netflix without the codecs, but anything that I wanted to play did work. So like MP4 support works, MKV, all that stuff now actually works without any additional codec installation, which is good. It also makes the video I did on installing the codecs essentially useless. So I'm good at that, actually.
It was a good video, though. It worked.
Yeah, the more stuff that becomes useless that I do, the better, I think.
Every time I try and set up openSUSE, I follow the same exact steps. I specifically search on Google for a specific thing. I click on a website. There's instructions. I think, oh, this looks familiar. And then I see that it's Nate's site. And I'm like, aha, it's you again.
It's me.
Thank you. Every time.
Yeah. I got a lot of stuff out there now. I want to welcome Skrapjaw. Welcome. And thank you.
Second. Oh, hey, what up? Hi.
Hey, Scrap.
Hey, Scrap.
Yeah, no problem, Nate. Do you want to tell them what the thanks are about? Because I know you're a geek, or do you want to wait till you get the thing?
We'll wait. We'll wait to talk about that until the community free pour at the very end.
Cool beans.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. All right, so for general user experience, how was openSUSE for you? Obviously, Jinda, you said you had some trouble with it. So until you followed my instructions.
Yeah, following your instructions helped, and KDE was a lot better than XFCE. XFCE, unfortunately, had a lot more issues in it than KDE.
I'm a little surprised by that. I've never had issues with XFCE, but I've been using Plasma for the most part. Well, that's unfortunate.
No, I'm using GNOME, and everything seems to be running pretty well in GNOME anyway, as expected. Don't really get many problems in the GNOME desktop. I do find openSUSE probably the best word for me would be overwhelming, because there's just so many things there. Like, I mean, I tend to dive into things a little bit, but I just found that there's everywhere you turn, everywhere you look, there's an abundance of things that you could do that's like would take you forever to sort of try and figure out what's going on. There's if you go into YAST, you go onto one of these tabs here called patterns, and there's like just an enormous amount of desktops and server function and primary functions and all these development proprietary software, and it's just full of stuff. And I just find it overwhelming to try and figure out what some of this stuff does. But and there's repos upon repos. It's just repos everywhere. I suppose you just do I went into YAST and just did a search looking for the stuff that I wanted to install, and most things pretty much showed up and were available. So there wasn't an issue there. It's just overwhelming. There's so many tools within. It reminds me a little bit of MX Linux, but I suppose MX Linux I'm more familiar with, whereas openSUSE I don't rarely use that much. So I suppose that's where it becomes overwhelming, not being familiar with everything that's within it.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I wrote an article. This is not trying to constantly promote me, but I was very excited about this. So YAST actually gets beat up a lot online. I don't know if you by some people, and I was irritated by something I read once about YAST, and so I wrote an article basically about some kind of a goofball number, like 13 great things or 11 best things about YAST or something like that. And I'm sure Jinda can find it quicker than I can because he's good like that. It's top 11 reasons YAST makes openSUSE awesome. So I knew it was a prime number. And
right.
I agree.
And those are the reason I wrote that article was because someone was kind of being a doodlebug. And so I kind of wrote, like, these are basically the modules that I like to use, why I like to use them, what makes them useful, and so forth. And so just kind of I think a lot of those modules could be an article unto itself because there's so much complexity to it. Like you said, there's a lot of complexity, a lot of things you can do with it. And I think it's a strength, but I can see how it's also perhaps a weakness. But it's good because it exposes the functionality to you. So if you are seeking that functionality out, you can find that functionality. It's there and available.
It's sort of like Plasma, the way Plasma gives you so much flexibility. Kind of like a window manager. You have all this flexibility, but with a window manager, just have a text file, and it's up to you to figure out how to include things and turn things off, turn things on. And then Plasma is all these GUI ways of customizing the everything about it. I think that's the way YAST is. There's all these ways you can do all of these things with the terminal or config files, or you can just use YAST and use the GUI for everything. And since there's so many things you can do, I mean, the GUI has to be humongous with all the different options and everything.
And keep in mind that the target audience for openSUSE has been Windows sysadmins to some extent. So people who are used to using Windows and having a control center that has all the different little functions. It's all there.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So
that's a real good point.
Who they're targeting.
I was going to say that's why, like, I'm just a basic user pretty much at the end of the day, and I suppose if you went sourcing out openSUSE for a particular use case, then you would probably enjoy coming across all the tools that openSUSE has available. But if you just wanted to install it and use it, then I suppose that's where it becomes overwhelming in my case anyway.
Sure.
Hmm.
I think that's a fair assessment. And that's actually one of the reasons why I really enjoy openSUSE is because I have, as Sravan calls it, I have these crazy projects. Or would you call them nutty projects or screwy project? What was the adjective you used to describe what I did?
I think I call it many crazy projects.
Okay, so that's fine. So I have many crazy projects that I do. I thought it was something a little more biting than that, but that's fine. If you come with something more biting, we'll run with that one. So it's nice to have that flexibility, so I can have one install base that I use over and over again, but then I do it all with openSUSE, and I have all those tools readily available. And if I want to strip it down, it's really very easy to strip down as well. And because of the terminal interface access, like I can't remember a lot of Linux commands. I am probably one of the worst Linux users out there because of that. Like I have to use fish shell, the fun interactive shell, friendly.
There's nothing wrong with fish. I love fishing. It's great.
I love fish too.
It's if you don't know, even if you know the base command and you're like, what was that option again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or what? Where is that? What's that file? What was the last thing I did? Man. Or it'll auto cache things like if you need to install a package, it'll do all kinds of cool stuff with that.
Yeah.
No shame.
No shame at all. So I use it. I have it as my default shell because I need the hand holding. So, but let's say I just can't remember, which does happen. I can just go type yast in the terminal. I'll get an ncurses interface, and then I have access to all those functions and so forth. And so that makes my life a lot easier. Essentially, is what it boils down to, and that's another reason why I like it.
That maybe a lot of distros probably should go that way, where you've got a GUI for everything. That's the way most people use computers, isn't it? I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like today morning, I wanted to again explore Yast. I think Shikal was mentioning earlier, like what makes openSUSE different is Snapper and Yast. So I'm very familiar with Snapper because that's what I use on my Butterfly systems. So other thing left to explore was Yast. I was going through all the different things. Like I know how to do like the system administration things in command line, but it was really refreshing to see that much power and control in a GUI interface where whatever stuff you can do. I think I posted some of the screenshots in the chat too. Like for grub, there is like minute control. Okay, what's a grub timeout? What if you want to enable OS prober or not? Like other settings. I think I posted today morning some of the screenshots of Yast, and I think even the package management is in the same interface. Like it's like a coherent way to manage different settings on your system. I think that's really good. Again, for people who are not familiar with command line or don't want to deal with the command line, I think that's, and still want power and control. Again, I haven't seen anything else like that. Like yes, it's like so powerful and so like even in GUI, like most of the time in Linux you get power, but power is mostly in the terminal. If you know what commands you are using, you know what you want, then it's pretty much you can do whatever you want. But I feel that again in Yast you can do all those things, like most of those things anyways. But it's in a nice GUI interface, which is probably foolproof. I think it's tested. I'm not sure. Right, Nate? It's tested in Enterprise or whatever. But it's really good. Again, package management in the same interface. Like everything is centralized. Again, mostly GNOME users don't like the KDE settings and the vast IF options. But I'm, again, as a Windows user and KDE user, I'm more familiar with that. And I really enjoyed like vast variety of things I could explore in all the VAS setting and the YAST settings.
I will say there is one downside to all that YAST goodness. If you know the YAST way of doing it, then you don't know how to do it in the rest of Linux. So I think that is a downside. So if you have to administer, Red Hat or Ubuntu, you're kind of at a disadvantage if you came up in the SUSE side of things. So that is one of the concerns and criticisms of YAST.
But I have a counterpoint. Like again, I know all this system administration things in the Arch Linux way. It's probably systemd, so it mostly works in other distributions too. But for people who just want to get stuff done, who already know what they're doing, I think YAST is a really, really good tool. Like I'm really impressed by it. Like I understand why you like it so much and why if people just wanted to use openSUSE for just using YAST, I'm totally with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but again, you should know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing and just don't want to deal with the terminal and remembering all the whole bunch of commands, which probably take up stuff in my brain, it's like, okay, I don't want to deal with like typing of commands, just click, 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 you're done. It's the same. It's powerful. Like it has so many options. It's really good.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. So are there any areas that you found particularly difficult in openSUSE, in Leap?
I think, again, it's because my drive size was so less, I couldn't figure out a way for setting up snapshots. If I have spent more time, I could have, but I couldn't figure out a way of setting up snapshots. But probably it was because I'm using VirtualBox and my drive size was like 8 GB or whatever.
Yeah, that could be.
It doesn't do its own snapshots when you update or anything, or it does?
It does.
You have to set it up.
So
you have to set it up?
Snapshots in YAST, but it said I had to enable Snapper, set up Snapper configs through a terminal. Is there any way to enable like set up Snapper configs like in GUI? I couldn't find that option in YAST.
I'm not aware of one, but it probably wouldn't let you anyway, because if your partition's too small, it's going to not let you.
So one thing, like on Arch, I use Btrfs Assistant. It's a front end for Snapper, so I can easily set up Snapper configs that way. So I thought there was something similar in openSUSE, but I think I was wrong. I think Snapper is really, really powerful. I prefer it over TimeShift. I think I don't like TimeShift. I've used it for 4 or 5 months. Like when I initially started using Linux, it's super confusing and not intuitive, and it sometimes breaks. But Snapper is rock solid. Like I like Snapper so much. Even the Arch version of, I think it's just a port in Arch. It's like, but for everyday use, doing stuff in command line, especially for Btrfs restoring, I think you need a really good front end for it. I think YAST has the restoring part, but not the configuration part.
Anybody else with areas they found difficult?
I'm just curious that, like, updating the system, there's a package updater within Leap, and being on GNOME, there's also a software center that brings up updates as well. But I have to think the package updater is the main one that you would use to update. Is that correct? Is there another way, or?
So you can use for Leap,
Zipper.
you can use the terminal, like zipper update. You can also do like GNOME software will do updates on it. Discover will update it as well. So that's not necessarily true in Tumbleweed, but it is true in Leap.
Do you update openSUSE with Discover, Nate?
I had the exact same question.
Leap, yes. Tumbleweed, no.
Why?
So Tumbleweed uses a different mechanism for doing updates, slightly different. So because it evaluates the packages and then determines what's the best combination. And PackageKit doesn't like that, because it will not allow for the repository shifts in repositories and some of the interaction that the zipper will require.
So it's the same thing with Pacman then. Like Pacman really doesn't like PackageKit.
Yep.
That's the question I had because I didn't explore Discover too much, but I explored the package manager in Yast. It was easy to search for packages and search for install packages, search for packages I want. I just installed one NeoFetch. It was easy to find and install it. Like I can click, I think check box and then click. It was pretty easy.
I will say that the nice thing about Tumbleweed, which is, I'm not talking about Tumbleweed, but if you do get things out of whack, like with your, like if let's say you've experimented a lot, you've messed with your system, which I'm sure nobody here does but me. If you do a sudo zipper dup, it'll pretty much clean up most of your messes that you've made, and it'll basically use the combination of snapshots to give you a working system again. So usually, unless you really borked the system, like some configuration files, you should, it's pretty much, it'll take care of it for you. Prophetic, welcome. Nice to see your face. Hopefully your mic's working. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay, you're like super quiet. I just want to make sure I can.
I'm sorry. Is this a little better?
That's a lot better.
Yeah.
Cool.
You have a great voice.
So while you were talking about zipper updates, I decided to SSH into 3 of my servers, all running openSUSE Tumbleweed, and run sudo zipper dupe on all of them. And nothing has broken. They rebooted, and I can still log back into them.
Challenge accepted and passed.
That's actually the thing. The reliability is pretty darn great.
And it's incredible.
Now, Sravan, you also mentioned that you thought Zipper was slow. Was it Zipper or just the installer was slow?
Nah, Zipper was one thing I like about Zipper. It was faster than DNF. I give it
Really?
that.
I find the other way to be true, that DNF is actually a little faster than Zipper.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you tried it on bad systems, like your Pi or whatever?
I don't have bad systems. They all run openSUSE, so they're all good.
I'm talking about limited hardware, not software. Limited hardware.
No,
I
not
think it's a good exercise to try that because
okay.
Fedora was
So do you?
on my Pi. I was using Zipper on virtual machine on my good laptop, so maybe that's why it was faster. But I found the Zipper experience slightly better than DNF. But it might be mostly, I think it is related to my hardware I was running it on.
Yeah, it could be. I find that DNF handles some things a little bit more cleanly than Zipper. Like Zipper says, hey, this doesn't work because can't find a dependency, whatever. Do you want to keep the obsolete or switch to this one? And the way I think DNF handles a little bit smoother than Zipper. Zipper requires interaction, DNF would not. So you can actually switch Zipper. Like there's DNF will work completely on openSUSE now. So there's
really?
Yep. So if you want to, you can actually change everything to run off DNF instead of Zipper.
So you're saying Zipper doesn't do that many things on the back end and requires some manual intervention?
Yeah. It doesn't. I mean, you can say that might be a good thing too, but I think that's
It's a good point.
I think it's not good for end user experience as much as the nerd. Like the nerd probably likes the interaction to say, I want to keep the obsolete one. No, I want to switch to this repository. But I think that the way DNF kind of solves it does it in a where the user doesn't have to interact with it. So if you
That's a good.
Yep. What's that?
But if you're saying it's all like tested, like whenever they release it, like why is manual intervention needed?
It's not that it's needed. It's just that Zipper is trying to be helpful in giving the user options, because
Okay.
there might be sometimes where you actually want to hold on to an older package because the newer one might do something funky that you don't want. So it's a double-edged sword. Kind of is a good point Nate is making.
Or if you let's say you're running multiple repositories, and you want to use some newer like Perl packages because you have some reason for that. And then, when an update comes down and the official repository has, has newer stuff, then it might actually break things if you actually switch to the newer packages rather than keep the obsolete ones.
I remember when you set up codecs in openSUSE, it says something about always default to them, or always default to the new repo, or should the regular repo take priority? Something like that. It's like a question that I ask you.
Yeah, it's I think allows repository change or something like that.
Allow vendor change.
Yeah, vendor change. That's what it is. Like I wrote it and I can't even remember. Terrible.
Yeah, and that's something that's like, again, like a double-edged sword. It's like it's trying to be helpful, but then like it could backfire. You have to, but it all depends. But I think it's awesome that it gives users that choice.
Yeah, I agree. But
I'm like new to openSUSE ecosystem, and it's like I get it. Like I get what they're going for the being helpful for users, being like thoughtful in that sense. But to someone who's new or not used to it, I could see how that could be like off-putting a little bit.
Yeah.
Also, I ran sudo zipper up in the morning and nothing happened. So there is a image updated regularly, or like Leap doesn't get any package updates. Like even if you run Ubuntu LTS, you get package updates once every 2 or 3 weeks, or even more frequently. But like not even a single package got updated.
I get pretty frequent updates. I mean, it's not
in Leap or
not all the time.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Tumbleweed, very regular.
So I think probably the image is refreshed frequently. What is put up online?
I'm not sure how often it's refreshed.
When you install openSUSE, you get the latest, right? Like you pull packages. Like if you set up online, it pulls the latest packages, right? You don't have to update it after you install.
Correct. If you
openSUSE,
if you select to pull updates, even with the offline installer, it'll give the option to pull down updated packages.
That might be it.
So that is something to keep in mind, that even though the installer is slow, you are getting the full updates. You don't have to update afterwards, like some other distros.
Yeah, with Ubuntu, it's like install updates while installing, and you right when you first boot, you have 100 updates waiting for you. Yeah. Like it's like, what the?
Yep.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Profiting. It's like, why is there no update? Like
it actually did. It's what is it going to do?
Version. So I did an offline installer. Like I did the bigger, like 3.8 GB ISO instead of the 200 MB ISO. I was like,
that's funny. It's like for Linux users, like this thing did what it was supposed to do. That's kind of fishy. I'm suspect now.
And it has been suggested not to check that update during install if the ISO is a little bit older, because it can mess things around. So you're better off to just grab the updates after install.
So I
usually do that.
Are you talking openSUSE or are you talking Ubuntu?
Nah, Ubuntu talking. Sorry to go off track.
No, it's all good. That's
no, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify what were you talking about.
Yeah. No, it was Ubuntu. It was somebody said don't check that off if you're downloading an ISO that's fairly old. Don't check the download updates during install, because it can get a bit funky on you at times. Maybe never had a problem with it, but I've seen people mention it a couple of times. Just another thing nobody has mentioned, Nate, is there is a welcome screen available within openSUSE Leap as well.
Yes.
That's got links to README and documentation. Get Software is an interesting one. It takes you to an online, where does it take you to? OpenSUSE.org packages.
Yep.
Yeah, that is pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So
they got other packages there. I tried installing some packages from there, but I wasn't successful, I don't think.
So there you can install pretty much anything that any member of the community has put together, essentially.
That's what that is.
Yep.
Right.
So if you go to Get Software, it'll take you to software.opensuse.org, or software.oo, as sometimes it's called for short. And there you can do a search for a package. Now, it may be to your benefit to actually select openSUSE Leap 15.4. Maybe not, but if you do that,
yes,
then type in whatever package you want. If it's Telegram or whatever, and then it'll then actually bring up then all the versions of Telegram available for you that have been built. So
yeah, well, Telegram was I think if I remember, Telegram is 2.4 or something like that, and I think the current one is around about 4 or something like that. So it was quite a fair bit out of date.
Yeah, I run the Flatpak as a result.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Actually, Flatpak, that's another thing I don't think I've even looked at within here. Is that's available out of the box, or you need to install support for Flatpak?
It's there. It's already, all you have to do is enable it. Like if you go into Discover, you will see that all you have to do is check a box and then it'll be
I
enabled.
don't have Discover.
Well,
I have
the
GNOME
software.
desktop.
I'm pretty sure GNOME
Oh, GNOME software. Yeah, you're probably
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
has that enabled. Just a tick to enable that.
Okay.
I have a feedback regarding the welcome screen, Nate. Most distros have welcome screens which do many things. I think it can be improved, at least a few options, which are like, which users can click on to go to the respective settings and yes, for like initial configuration. I know most of it is done in the installer itself, but if like welcome screen, like there's slightly more options for basic configurations and other stuff, I think that will be really helpful. Like click on a button to go to the package manager, or like bootloader, like whatever, like simple settings, like
Kind
just
of like what Solus does. Solus's package welcome screen does that too. It's like a good like shortcut link. It jumps in.
like, because you already have all those settings in Yash. Again, for new users, it might not be. I think Colin was saying it's like so many options. It's like at least some important ones you can just like link those apps just in the welcome screen with a little bit of text description saying,
That's
okay,
a good idea.
package manager is here, click on this button. Like it's very easy for me.
Sure.
Like I think that's a really good way. But I think again, you're saying like openSUSE is for Windows sysadmins, so they probably don't care. But it's just for normal users. Like if they're sysadmins, just ignore it.
I don't disagree with you at all. I think the challenge there is because there's so many desktop environments and there's not really a homogeneous openSUSE way of doing something, it could be a challenge just to get that to work effectively because you'd have to have a different
desktop settings. I'm talking about system administration settings. I think it's the same in everything. Like
yes.
Just within Yes.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about anything with scary settings. I'm just talking about Yast. Again, there are like maybe 10 or 20 apps in Yast for each individual thing. So some of the important ones, including package manager.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Have a link to that in welcome so that people know it's there, first of all. It's more about like teaching users, okay, these are the things available which you can do in your system, because most people don't know that.
I want to +1 that because when I, as a new user too, like I remember just muscle memory going to Discover to install software. And I know for Leap is different, but for Tumbleweed, there's different recommend ways of doing things. Even adding a printer. I did a YouTube video recently on like add a printer with me, and the default desktop environment method of adding a printer didn't work, so I had to do it through Yast, and it took a while, but I eventually got across the finish line adding a printer, which is like always you want to like crack open a beer because you feel like you conquered something after that in Linux. But like it's like it, and I should like the Yast explaining that Yast is like your all-in-one way to go to manage your system, and the welcome screen could be a nice onboarding thing. Just that one thing, just letting them know that Yast is the place to be for this kind of stuff. That could be very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good idea. I like it. I mean, I wouldn't use it because, I'm so entrenched up to my eyeballs in the whole thing. But for a new user, that's a great idea. They do have link to documentation, but I don't think it's all that helpful in that regard.
This is again, sorry to be critical, but one of the most useless welcome screens on a Linux distro I've used.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Puppy Linux welcome screen?
Yeah, look, but it's got a pirate chameleon that says ahoy. That won my heart right away.
That makes it win.
that does make it the best. Maybe not the most.
It has a lot of character to it.
Can I just add one nifty thing from a marketing communication standpoint? If you noticed, and Aris's awesome screenshot, which is shout out to Aris, always coming through with this kind of stuff, is on the bottom, you'll see a random thing. It says like the change in the openSUSE board. Well, what that welcome screen is pulling from is the openSUSE news blog. And then no matter what, the time you launch the welcome screen, it automatically fetches the news blog, the latest post.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like a nice way to keep you up to date. Like that is some next level marketing communications.
Arch could use that
thing. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
UI and Arch, blasphemy.
Well, the thing about Arch, right, is you're always supposed to read the latest news announcement.
You're supposed to read everything
before
always.
you update Arch. You can never update it just blindly. You're always supposed to check beforehand if there has been any news about anything.
How do they find the issues if nobody's updating blindly?
Change logs. You got to read everything.
No, there are some packages which make you read the news before you go ahead with your update, system update.
So Arch has the stable repo, which everybody uses, and there's also the unstable repo.
That shouldn't exist.
No, that's where the devs test stuff before pushing them to the stable repo.
Yeah, it's good to have, honestly. Probably shouldn't do everything on the main branch. That's risky.
At least know of 2 or 3 Arch packages which force you to read the news before you update it. And in EndeavorOS, we push notifications in case there is an Arch news. You need to enable it in the notifier, EndeavorOS update notifier, then you can get news just pushed onto your desktop. But even without that, like normal Arch, I think there are a few Arch packages which force you to read.
That makes a lot of sense.
I installed one which like it won't allow you to update until you press like, have you read the news? Yes, you have to type yes or whatever.
No, I just update blindly. That's it. Everything's running okay for me. Yeah.
He
Every now
closes his eyes and types update and just presses enter.
That's it. I even made my own little update icon. So all I have to do is just do a search for update, press it, opens a terminal, put in my password, done. And then when it's finished, it closes. Every now and then you do get a question. This one is conflicting with this one. So before I go yes or no, I will read up on that.
Flip a coin.
That's why you read the news.
Yeah, so just to see what people have been selecting and the reason why. Otherwise, yeah, just update.
So I don't know if anybody's touched on this. I just thought about this in Yast, and this is something that I kind of miss sometimes in a lot of other distributions. Yast has really extensive firewall configuration utility, and I used to run Minecraft servers semi-professionally, and this was very, very useful for me at the time. So that kind of a cool thing. Firewall is great, but sometimes extremely annoying, and Yast makes it easy to sort of punch it in the face.
There was an app armor stuff in Yast too. So
Yes, there
OpenSUSE
is.
comes with app armor by default. I think that's cool.
I just want to respectfully disagree with Shickle on the firewall configurator. So I installed the one from firewall-d -config is what it's called. I like that interface a lot better. It's
I
the
haven't
same
used
thing.
it. I have no idea.
I just happen to like the interface a lot better. How you can, it gives you a few more knobs to turn, and I prefer that. So it makes. So
I'm just used to distributions not shipping any at all.
So what I like about firewall-d is I have different rules based on what network I am. I have a default public one, which doesn't allow certain things. So then I have some trusted networks where I allow certain things. Then I have my home network, which I allow pretty much whatever I want. And then it's really nice and convenient to actually configure exactly how I want on my laptop. Not a big deal on a desktop because you're not moving it a whole lot, but maybe you are. I don't know. Maybe still doing LAN parties. But for my laptop, I like to have different rules.
That's cool.
Shickle, I think firewall-d applet, I think, which we ship on EndeavorOS, I think it's shipped on all desktop environments. I don't know where we got it from, but it's a simple GUI. I think it's inbuilt in GNOME or Plasma. I'm not sure, but most of our installs, at least over the past 3-4 months, have firewall-d and a firewall applet. So you have
That's
a
cool.
GUI to for configuring firewall. I found it hard the first day. It's like, I'm trying to SSH, nothing's working. It's a new system. I was like, I set up everything. Why isn't this working? I was like, oh, firewall. And I had to
Yep.
go to, like, as Nate said, like, you can configure the zone. It's all zones in firewall D. You can configure the zone for that particular network. And then in the zone, I think they're pre-configured zones, like home, public, like do whatever, everything's open.
Yeah.
And in that, if you go in for each service, there's already ports open. But for my
Yeah.
SSH, I don't use a default 22 port. So I had to go to the service and click on it and change it to my port. Like I don't use the default.
Ah, I see.
Never use 22 for SSH.
Yeah, see, I've used Firewall D. I've never used the GUI for it before, so
It's
that's
so
kind of cool.
easy. Like you can go to the service and then you have to change the port. Like if your port is non-default. So for each service, networking service, it already has all the settings. You just need to change them. And this can be configured for each zone so that, and then you can set a zone for each individual network you're on. It's like super cool. Again, it's not easy. First 2 days I was banging my head. What is this? And then I was like, okay, I get this. Now I know it's like granular, very, very granular control. Each individual
That's
service,
nice.
each individual network is super cool.
I see Michael is here from This Week in Linux and Destination
Everybody
Linux.
behave.
Oh, and Hardware Addicts. So it's nice to have Michael.
Everybody be good. Mike's here.
Try and behave.
Yeah, I'm not joining to have a conversation. I'm joining to be like the authority in the room.
Everybody, someone say something nice about KDE. Somebody.
KDE is cool.
I was coming and talk about the firewall application. It's pretty awesome. So the Firewall D, the GUI in Fedora is awesome. I can second that for sure. And what's cool about it is that it allows you to do stuff like when you first start using it, good luck in figuring out how to use it because it's not intuitive, but it is easy. After the first time you try it and see how it works, then it's super simple because it's just a list of different zones and groups. And then you have the ability to add ports and also port forwarding and all sorts of stuff just by these little tabs. And you just click add, put the number in, choose TCP or whatever, click OK, and you're done. And it's that simple to use, except unless you want it to be permanent. And there's a little extra drop down you got to change from runtime to permanent, and then you're good. The process is it's completely intuitively unintuitive.
Yes, that's about right.
So you have to do it
That
once
sounds-
for it to kind of click in your brain. Is that what has to
So
happen?
the first time will require you to go. You're going to look at it and go, okay, what now? And then once you do it, and the first time it works, it's just fine. Like the different zones, there's multiple zones you can do for different applications, and oddly enough, Fedora Workstation is a zone that's in every single one of the editions I've tried. So that one's an option to use instead of public. And if you want to do like local LAN stuff only, you can use the Fedora Workstation, and that's the one that typically works when I'm messing around with stuff. And the reason why it's interesting that y'all were talking about this is because I was messing around with that this morning with Firewall D to use something called DScreen, which is a way to essentially take a virtual monitor display and put it into a web browser to load up on your tablet and stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool application. And when I first launched it, it said, won't work. And then I went to the tutorial section of DScreen, and it was like, we have no help for you. Like it basically said that in the frequently asked questions, if you are having an error, unlike the ones we've already listed, we have no idea what your problem was. And the problem was the firewall was not allowing the port out. So once I did that, it was fine. Now I found another error that I need to figure out, but I don't think it's a firewall thing. You know, this is the first time I started playing with it. So
Now, there's some more coolness that I like about Firewall D is you can also define the services that you select as well. So there's a services tab. So let's say you do some obscure things for whatever reason. You can actually create your own rule sets of what ports to open and so forth based on whatever criteria it is. So if you know, and so it's very cool then, and that so you can actually create a custom rule set. Or if you want to edit an existing rule set, you can add additional rules to it. So all that flexibility, I think, is pretty darn cool. And I think one of my favorite features is they have a panic mode button. I've never used it. I don't know what it'll do. I don't know if it's gonna like start sirens and shut everything down, but it does have a panic mode.
Challenge may be accepted. I'm not sure.
Probably locks everything down.
But there's also a lockdown toggle as well as a panic mode.
Oh, okay.
Panic mode and lockdown. Panic mode means that all incoming, outgoing packets are dropped. That's not. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, don't do that one.
That's cool that's there though.
And Michael, it's really interesting to see someone else had the exact same experience I had with Firewall D.
Yeah.
I had the exact same experience.
Yeah, it's so weird because when I first loaded it, it was like, okay, what now? And then after I did one thing that got it working, it took a little bit to get it working the first time. Once I did, it was fine. No problem.
It's like roller skating, I guess, you know, like you kind of got to get a feel for it. You fall down a bunch, you know, but eventually you run into that mural of Usher painted on the wall enough times and you get going. And
It sounds like very specific.
yeah, I might have lost a few teeth, but it's okay. I can tell people at parties that Usher knocked my teeth out.
I was like, this is too specific to be a coincidence.
That's funny. There's also an applet in Firewall D, so you can actually have a status in the corner as well in your system tray, which I think is also very cool.
Wait, you guys still have system trays?
Yeah, we used a property.
I put some of the links in the chat if someone else wants to put in the YouTube chat for the Firewall D applets. Also, Nate, I tried putting together those rules and firewalls, and after a while, I was playing around with too many services. I was like, I gave up and disabled firewall in my local network.
The cool thing about Firewall D in Fedora is that you don't have to do anything out of the box. It's just there, and you just let it do its thing. And 99% of the time, I do not mess with the firewall stuff. Like the defaults are solid in Fedora, and I've only changed 2 things, and that's because I added some extra stuff that I wanted to play with, and that's it. Oh, there is one thing that I will say that with Fedora, the only thing that I think is probably annoying is you have to activate KDE Connect inside of Firewall D before you can use it. And that is like...
openSUSE is the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the one thing I was about to say is that
But it is a
KDE
preset.
Connect.
It is a preset though, so you can actually select it.
It's a preset that's not checked. I just think it should be checked.
Is that because KDE Connect has to like directly interact with local devices on the network?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's weird because I've never had that issue with KDE Connect, and I use it on the regular because I never turn my phone off of silent, and I always lose it in the house. And so I'm running to the laptop and flipping it open and it's hitting ring my phone.
Well, the question is, are you using Fedora?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I've never had to mess with Firewall D to get KDE Connect to work.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
I mean,
Wow.
oh, okay. When did you install? What version of Fedora did you start with?
35.
Maybe that's what happened. Maybe they fixed it.
Maybe.
Because I started with 33 and I've been upgrading ever since. And there's a thing that Fedora has where it's fantastic, but also kind of a problem, is that it doesn't overwrite your settings. And if you have settings that are out of date, like a year or 2, that could be a problem. So I've decided that I'm going to reinstall my Fedora for 36, even though I don't need to. Like, it's totally fine. I can upgrade if I want to, but I just want all these different settings. So I'm going to test that when I get it reset up.
So when you do a DNF or a DNF update, it doesn't ask you, hey, do you want the maintainer version? Do you want to keep yours? Do you want the new version?
No, it typically just accepts whatever you have. If you don't have a configuration, it will change it. Like if you have a default, it'll change the default. But if you have anything modified, then it will keep whatever your modifications are. That also happens with KDE itself. They do the same thing.
Okay, because normally a reason I've done a handful of updates, but normally I just hit update, tack Y, and walk away, and just let it do its thing and come back, and it's like, okay, it's done. So
I think it's more like from one version to the next, you probably wouldn't notice much changes because I don't think they change all that much in between one difference. But I started with the Fedora 33 beta. So I went from that, and I'm actually still on 35. Like I haven't even updated to 36. But because I went through multiple things, that's why some of these features, like some of the Btrfs features, are not included because I started using it before Btrfs was actually released in Fedora. So
So you're like a Fedora hipster?
No.
You started using with Btrfs before it was cool?
Well, technically, if you were an openSUSE user, you're using it first. But that's the hipsters.
That's true. That's true.
I just don't have a neck beard.
Not yet.
I can't grow one.
There's that also.
I haven't shaved since November. Okay.
Fedoras do wear those fedoras though, literally. Like, so it's kind of like,
if I had one, I would for sure. But the Fedora Btrfs is nice. It doesn't have the same snapshotting options that openSUSE has, which I want those. But what's interesting about the upgrade mechanism, I don't know how they do it, but openSUSE and Fedora both have like some sort of magic that's incantations that are happening when you do upgrades. Because I've done an update from Fedora 33 beta all the way to now, and I've never had a system break. I mean, I've had some issues, of course. It's called computers, but I've never had like an actual system break. And so I'm impressed by that. And also openSUSE did the same thing. I actually purposefully waited 1.5 years on one of my installs to see if it would upgrade, and it totally did fine. I mean, it asked me a bunch of questions like 1,000 times, but other than that,
Leap or Tumbleweed?
It was Tumbleweed, and it was
amazing.
It was 2,700 packages in Tumbleweed, and it did it fine.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that it just works.
Yeah, the fact that I don't know how they're able to do that with a rolling distro, but it works.
I had 800 and I did Bjork something, but again, I was a newer Tumbleweed user and I did do some updates in different systems and different parts. I didn't do it like the clean zipper way. So I kind of blame myself on that. But what's amazing about the snapper rollback is just pick a snapshot and you're back in the game, and it's beautiful.
And if you do a full system upgrade, it will automatically create the snapshot.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Fedora allows you to do snapshots, but it requires you to kind of do it manually.
And don't you got to do something in the grub to make it readable or easy to get to in the grub? Or does it show up?
It's possible. I have no idea because I didn't need to use the snapshot when I did make one.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I'm going to end this segment on openSUSE and on the why you should give openSUSE Leap a spin. So I'll start with you, Eris. So let's pretend you are sitting at a bar and you are finishing up your house draft, and someone says, "Hey, I saw you on Linux Saloon. Why should I try openSUSE Leap?"
openSUSE has very advanced tooling. It allows you to do many things you would be able to do through the terminal and maybe scripts by going through a GUI, unlike other distros. So that it gives you a lot of power if you want to change things around.
Cool. I like that. Sravan, let's say you're at the beach over there on Lake Erie nearby, and as you're throwing your towel out, someone says, "Hey, I was thinking about giving this openSUSE Leap a try. What do you think?"
Yeah, use it if you like green or chameleons, and then if you know what Yast is. Yeah, I think for me, it's the main appeal is Yast and Snapper, Btrfs, all those things.
Okay.
It's easy for power users to maintain and modify the system.
Cool. I like it. Colin, let's say you're getting into Thunderdome, but with a kangaroo. And the kangaroo asks you, why should I, right before it punches you in the face, why should I try openSUSE Leap? What would you say?
I'd be amazed that I'll be in Thunderdome with the kangaroo to start with. I thought you were going to ask me about if I thought you were going to ask me if I was in a pub. So I was going to ask you how many beers have I had, because that determines how much nonsense I talk.
It will also determine how well you do with the kangaroo.
That's right. Well, actually, I'd actually say, to be honest, if you like to have control over your system and use graphical user interfaces to do so, and control everything that you like to do, then I would suggest give openSUSE a try.
Okay. I like it. Jinda. All right, so let's say you're on the job site and your crane mechanism actually dropped the wind turbine on the ground and it burst into fire. But as it's falling, someone asks you, why should I give openSUSE Leap a try? What would you say?
It's got the best installer, I think, that I've ever used.
Okay.
I really do. I mean, to me, that was top notch. You get to pick what desktop you want. You get to do all your updates right away. Errors pointed out, you can even take out packages. I really think that that's probably one of the best things of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great installer. Skrapjaw, let's say you're hopping into a rickshaw and someone else is hopping in that rickshaw with you. They're over there in Ohio, because they have rickshaws everywhere in Ohio, I'm sure. And they ask you why I should try openSUSE Leap. What would you say?
Try it, because I haven't, and tell me about it.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That works for me. Then that's when you hop out of the rickshaw.
I'm sorry, I don't do my homework always. Sometimes I try to like cram and install it on a separate machine while I'm sitting here, and then, or whatever. But
Yeah.
And then they get out of the rickshaw and go, "Are you kidding me? Okay, now you get up and pedal."
Yep, especially as we're going through Mitchell Tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So Shickle, you are wandering in the desert of Arizona and you bump into a cactus. And that cactus asks you why it should try openSUSE Leap. What would you say?
Hi, cactus. If you have an unhealthy obsession with storage and weird ways to configure it, there's nothing else that's gonna be able to install and in as many strange and odd configurations as this. So,
Are you
Go
trying to
for
say
it.
there's always a better way to do things?
oh my god,
That was
wow,
a nice one.
That was smooth.
wow,
Yeah.
smooth like butter.
Can't believe it's not butter.
FS. Now, Prophetic, you said you didn't try Leap and you want to pass, but I can't let that happen. So let's pretend you are at a bar, let's say a saloon, and people are talking about openSUSE Leap. What do you think would be the reason that you might want to try it? See, I tried to change it up there.
Oh boy, I would say if you want a GUI way, a good GUI way to manage your system, that will be the best way to go. As you asked, yes is the best way to go.
All right, Michael, I know you haven't tried Leap in a while. So you're a Fedora man, but let's pretend like you are flying to California, and you happen to go, I don't know, for some reason, and in a back alley you get cornered, and they're gonna mug you, but they realize you're Michael Tennell, and it says, "Hey, what do you think of openSUSE Leap?" What would you say?
If you don't give me an answer, they'll take your wallet.
That's why you take two wallets. One's fake. That way you can get mugged. It's okay. But so there's a couple reasons why I like openSUSE Leap. And I do like the fact that it's a once a year update. So it's a stable release for people who don't want to have maintenance all the time. but it also isn't an insane amount of time. Now, for me, I prefer a little bit sooner, as in like once every 2 weeks, but that might be too much for some people in like an enterprise world. But I like one thing that no one mentioned, and it's something that Leap has that nothing else has, and that is the ability to get desktop support directly from the company that is kind of backing it, sort of. So with openSUSE Leap, you can convert it into SLED or SUSE Linux Enterprise Desktop and pay them a yearly fee to get technical support on the desktop. So you could basically offer it to someone and kind of do a hands-off thing and say, here, you do this. And that's a cool feature that openSUSE has with SLE integration. And I think that's probably one of my favorite features of the Leap SLED connection.
Yeah, I do like that. And I do pay for a SLED, I guess, subscription, a workstation subscription. Not that I ever use it. It's just another way of contributing to those that are working on it. It was actually Keneal that recommended that. So
Nice.
All right.
So Nate.
Yes.
Let's imagine that you are in a laboratory, and in that laboratory you have some visitors, and those visitors may be aliens because it's a laboratory and science and reasons. And those aliens are asking you, why should they use openSUSE Leap? Now, of course, you could also recommend Tumbleweed, but I think that they're timid, cautious aliens. So why specifically Leap?
So did they land behind the laboratory or in the parking lot in the front? I think that's important to know.
They had two different ships. One was more polite in the parking lot. The other one just didn't take the right directions, and it was behind the lab.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, what I would say is, if you like to be able to mess with your systems and not suffer any consequences of having to like rebuild your system, then the snapshot system in openSUSE, because it's automatic, will take care of all that pain, and it'll be like kind of like ServPro, like nothing, like it never even happened. You can roll it back and keep driving on. So that would be
definitely good for the cautious aliens.
Yes, and that's actually my number one reason for why. What actually turned me from being like I like openSUSE to I love openSUSE, because I tend to mess with my system because like, oh, I think I can do it better, and invariably I can do it better means I can't, and I break something and then I can just roll it back and then I can go on with life and living, so I don't have to worry about the consequences of poor choices. Essentially,
that's the slogan for openSUSE now.
The consequence, so you don't have to suffer the consequences
of your poor choices.
Yeah.
But why Leap or Tumbleweed?
Well, they're asking about Leap. So
cautious aliens, remember?
Yeah, cautious. Yeah. So I
That's
like
a whole other episode.
Yeah, I like Leap on specific systems I don't want to mess with. Like I don't want to touch them, and I don't have to really worry about them, like keeping them updated. So I have one system in my house for that, and there's some others I administer outside of the house that I keep Leap on, and so it's just really easy to update it. Although Tumbleweed is actually to the point where I guess I could really get away with that as well, but I think the fact that Discover works real well with Leap because of the update mechanism and package kit works better with Zipper for Leap than it does for Tumbleweed because of reasons. So that would be why. All right. So next week we are doing open mic night. So bring your topics, whatever you have. Put them in the Tux Digital Discourse forum. You can put it, start threads there if you want to talk about things you want to discuss, or you can do it in the Telegram, anything you want. So next week we will have open mic night, whatever you want to talk about. Open Nate, yeah, I guess. Sravan, that's funny. Then we will bring those up, have a chat, and very likely, if we run out of topics, we will use more news from This Week in Linux. And I do want to give.
Was saying that it's open nate.
Oh, open nate. That's even better. Sounds fancy. Just some real quick housekeeping. Sort of housekeeping. It's more like network housekeeping. And since you're here, Michael, you are going to Scale in California.
That is correct. I will be going to Scale on Wednesday, and I have no idea what to expect. It's the biggest conference that for Linux has, and with the whole return to society.
person.
Yeah, I don't know if that's still going to be true or whatever, but it's I think it's gonna be fun. We have a booth that is number 901 for anybody who's going to be there, and one cool thing is that System 76 is gonna be close enough where I can go hang out a little bit, so that's gonna be
Cool.
fun to do. And yeah, there's it's funny because we wanted to get as close to as possible to Jill, so it'd be easier for Jill to go back and forth and do multiple both of the booths, and because she has the Linux Chicks LA booth, and they were like, well, we got it in the same room. Turns out those rooms are enormous. So our booth is 901 and her booth is like 602 or something. Like, okay, it's the same room, but it's pretty far.
Yeah, I'm
Poor
interested
Jill.
in seeing pictures. Like, I don't know if we can do any live streams from there.
Yeah, we're gonna share some. We're gonna share some photos and videos in the Matrix DL patron room, and this is going to be something that we're gonna do throughout the conference. But we're also gonna do some live streams, and we're gonna be doing some videos, and in general. And I also plan to do. I don't know how well it's gonna work. Let's just be honest. It's my first attempt to do this, but I'm gonna try to do like a Casey Neistat vlog, and we'll see what happens. It'll probably be terrible, so don't have much expectation. But I think it's going to be fun anyway. But
Well, if I
there's
just
gonna be a lot of stuff we're going to be publishing.
if I just expect it to be terrible, then it should be good.
Yes, let's go with that. Let's go with that.
I'm good with
Also,
that.
we're going to be doing some parkour, me and Ryan, and
Nice.
we're going to do some videos of our extreme parkour skills, and that's gonna be fun.
Well, try not to break anything, like a hip or something.
Now, when you see our parkour, yeah, you're gonna be like, no, they had no chance of breaking anything.
So it's a low risk parkour. You did your risk
No,
assessment.
it's super extreme. It's just we're just efficient.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna,
What he's trying to say is that the horrible nature of things are going to be par for the course.
Yes.
Ooh.
Nate, I'm surprised no one made parkour jokes for openSUSE Leap. I'm disappointed.
That was the one to make.
that was
That
Definitely
was the
wanna
one
make.
to make.
all
Well,
right.
I would've-
You're
I would've-
1-on-1, Skrapjaw.
I would have tried it this week, but I wasn't willing to take the leap of faith.
Oh, there we go. I like it.
Got you on the back end.
So I guess that was the only real bit of news / housekeeping. So thank you, Michael, from This Week in Linux, for serving us up a great flight of topics that we're now going to skip again.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm totally happy with skipping those. You can use some of those topics next week.
I probably will.
I might not be doing Twill next week. I don't know yet because of the whole conference thing. I will definitely not be doing it live. I might try to do a pre-record, but it depends on how much time I have. And based on my typical travel itinerary that I usually have, I will have no chance of at all doing that. So it's like a 30% chance I'll make another one. So you might want to just keep those in mind.
I have a folder of all the news topics, so I can definitely that. And I'm using HedgeDoc, so of course I'll have it. So that brings us to we can cover Skrapjaw, what you found and sent my way.
What I found a thing I thought was a console. It was not a console, but it's a thing for a console. And I thought of Nate because I was digging out things in the basement for a garage sale. I was like, I'm either going to sell this or I'm going to send it to Nate. So I gave him the option and he said, send it to me. It's a module. It's the module number 1 for the ColecoVision. It allows you to play Atari 2600 games on your ColecoVision.
I don't have a ColecoVision yet, but I know someone who did have one, and I wonder if he still has it. So I might be trying to dig that up.
It's in the box with the everything intact, and it's just the unit. It doesn't need power. It's powered by the ColecoVision and all that. So what's in the box is in the box, and it's on its way.
That's pretty cool. Adding to my vintage tech collection. So thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is module number 1. Yep.
In closing time here, Michael, is there a Destination Linux streaming live tomorrow?
There is episode 288. We're going to be talking about quite a few things. One of those things will be Linux Mint. The other thing will be a rundown of all the different cool, fun, and even silly things you can do in a terminal. Some of which are surprisingly useful, and others are completely worthless, but you can do them, and that's fun.
Now,
And we're going to be talking about some other stuff too, and we're also going to be talking about a sort of community type thing that we're thinking about doing, but we're going to do like a test run, perhaps. So we want to check out the episode and see what we're talking about. It's in the community feedback when we get to it.
Awesome. Now, is the stuff that you're going to show in the terminal, is it going to be as cool as the No More Secrets terminal app?
That is a good one. We might actually have to reference that of saying, here's an option too. But yes, there are a couple that are at least on par with that one. There's one that's surprisingly silly, yet at the same time functional. So that one's going to be something that I think a lot of people are going to want to play with and check out. And I can't tell you because that's not a good tease. So check it out tomorrow, 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern for Destination Linux Live, episode 288.
Awesome. So Linux User Space, they're back at it. So hunt them down on the interwebs if you are interested in hearing more Linux User Space. I'm at a podcast called Linux Out Loud. I have one wonderful co-host and one that's mediocre. Wendy is the wonderful and Matt's the mediocre. And we had some listener feedback. I kid, Matt. Matt's great. Or maybe I'm the mediocre one. Anyway, doing some listener feedback. If you want more stuff on me, go to cubelinate.com. I do things. Linux Saloon is part of the Tux Digital Network. Check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank all of you for being a part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back into personal computers. Thank you for stopping by, and be sure to tip your developers. And please remember to always Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yous.
Good night.
Bye.
Arrivederci.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Bye.
And actually,
That's
go ahead.
Sorry, Nate.
No, you go ahead.
Sorry, Nate. You have to do editing. You're muted.
That's because I have a little munchkin here. I was going to ask Prophetic if he can send me some clips of him saying different nouns that I'm just going to use for. I'll talk to you about it. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you about it because I really like your voice.
Oh, thanks. I think it's the mic filter. I think the filter says make the voice sound awesome, and I just press it, and then
well,
it's not me at all. It's the mic.
Well, like if you sound like a turd, you can only shine up a turd so much. Obviously, you're not a turd that needs shining. So anyway, I'll talk to you about it after the show. But I want to see.
Good.
I see Michael is here from This Week in Linux. Can you turn up your volume just a little bit? You're on the quiet side, and I don't want to have to
I can talk closer into the
There you
microphone.
go.
That's beautiful right there.